So today I'm joined by Philip Folsom, founder of Philip Folsom Programs, and he's also the CEO of Wolf Tribe. Philip, welcome.
Hello, good to be here.
All right, so we got introduced through a mutual friend, Kerry David, and heard some good things about your work. Let's start first with, what is a wolf tribe?
A wolf tribe, that's one of the signature programs that I do when I'm working with my organizational teams doing culture work. And it turns out that our species had what's called our cognitive revolution about 35,000 years ago. And it coincided exactly to our partnership with the wolf. And the wolf became our dog over the past 35,000 years. So this is our first animal partner or interspecies partner. And it turns out that we adopted a lot of the behavioral systems of wolves in terms of our collaboration and, most importantly, the way we specialize behavior within our tribe. And that kind of points towards those behavioral buckets that Carl Jung looked at with his archetype work, that we have our kind of what we would call an alpha, which is, our kings and queens and royalty and our visionary leaders. And our friend Kerry David, she's an alpha. And so she's somebody who has a big vision for things and she wants to change the world. And then we have our implementers of that vision. And we would call those the warrior class people. And I would fall into that bucket. So Kerry inspires me and I would go out and I would implement some of her vision. And the wolves have that same breakdown. And then the other two big archetype buckets are the specialist category, and wolves have specialists that actually do specific things related to hunting and tracking, and they're actually trained to do that, and they fill in a certain gap within the needs of the pack. And then there's the fourth category, which is called the nanny wolf, and that's the wolf that only takes care of the young. And in our society, that would be what's called the lover, or the best friend, or the ally. And when you look at our mythology, we see those are the four characters that we always have in our stories. And we all fall into one of those character classes as well. And, for those of you guys who enjoyed the Harry Potter series, those are the four houses of Hogwarts. And those are the four characters on the TV show Friends or the book Lord of the Rings. And so we got that from wolves. And when I'm working with my clients, it's important to look at how do we activate and take advantage of those specializations so we can be more resilient. And that's probably going to be part of our conversation about climate change, is how do we shore up our ability to withstand change and to be able to respond to change. And evolution is not survival of the fittest. Evolution is survival of the most adaptable. And this is what's going to save us.
Yeah, so on your point about adaptation, it's about the ability for all of our specialization to collaborate together, because only within the context of a pack or collaborative organization, however that dynamic organism is created, only within that context are we able to actually do more than the individual parts. So the sum is actually greater in this context.
Yep.
Within the wolf tribe methodology and the archetypes that you mentioned, what are the three master maps of humanity?
First of all, just to touch base on what is a map. The maps are lenses through which we view aspects of the world that we don't understand. And there are certain things that are simple hardware just can't quite grasp yet, like time, for example. Nobody can really share what time is until you start pivoting into using graphics or symbols or equations. And it becomes very philosophical because we really don't understand what time is. And so we invent a cool map so that you and I can both agree on how to utilize or engage with the things we don't understand. And therefore we get to show up on this podcast at exactly the same time and space. So we're utilizing time even though we don't understand it. And our mythology is our attempt to project into those things we don't understand, of really what is our legacy and what is meaning and what is my purpose. And so mapping is one of those uniquely human things that gives us access to struggle with the unknown universe. And The map of our psychology is the archetypes that I just was sharing with you, those 4 big primary buckets. And so that's the first master map. And it seems to be central to every culture that we have studied, which means that it's not cultural, it's species-wide. So we seem to have, as a collective entity, adopted these 4 big primary buckets of behavior. And so that first master map is our specialization system that we adopted and allow us to be versatile and adaptable. So that's the first master map. And the second one is there's a very sequential way that you build a tribe. Then it's not random, and it again is a universal dynamic. So when you look at the behavioral system of a military unit or a sports team or a very high functioning corporate department, they have the exact same DNA, which means this is how we're designed to function. And in anthropology, we call that a tribe system. And it's a very sequential, systemized structure that when coaches go into sports psychology, they're taught how to build a tribe. And when people go into the military as an officer, you're taught exactly how to scaffold your team. And again, that's tribe. So that's the second master map, is how do we do that? And it starts with the foundation of common mission, vision, and values, which are incredibly important. And then we get into kinship. And kinship is a really interesting word. It's the root of the word kind. Mm-hmm. So the way that I treat my kin is with kindness, right? And the way that I treat people who are not my kin, that's not kindness. And if you're wondering why our society is so damaged and structured and fractured, it's because we're not treating each other with kinship or kindness. So kinship is the second layer of that tribe pyramid. And then we move into healthy conflict, and then ultimately accountability and thriving. So a lot of my work that I do with organizations is to walk them through that so they understand how to create and maintain that really high-performing, resilient tribe system. So that's the second master map. And then the third one is ancient, and again, everybody knows it, and it's called the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is a simple human being's engagement with the unknown. And again, this is one of those things that we kind of struggle with. Infinity, our souls, there's all these kind of big topics. And the hero's journey is our attempt to engage with how do I move into the future with some measure of understanding. And it's really, Joseph Campbell was one of the great researchers of this. And he was a mythologist that studied all the cultures from all around the world. And he noticed that we keep telling the same story over and over and over again. And he refers to that as the monomyth, which means that there's only one story we keep telling. And that story is the story of our life in a metaphoric sense. Even this podcast will contain the arcs of a hero's journey. It means you and I are meeting each other. How brave are we going to be? Are we going to accept and answer the call to adventure? We're going to have some challenges and adversity with things. Eventually, we will push through some big hardship and discover something about ourselves, the topic, or each other. And then we'll return to the same starting point, transformed. And that really is life in a microcosm, but it's also life in a macro. So we're doing the same thing in climate change. We are staring into the abyss of a threshold of an imminent scary thing that's coming at us. And what do most people do when we're faced with a scary challenge? Luke Skywalker, for example, he said, "Would you like to go train to be a Jedi?" And what does he say? He says no, because we always refuse the call. And that's true of every story. And we're doing the same thing with climate change right now, is that we have been faced with a call to adventure of a potentially species-altering experience. And Nobody's doing anything about it, because the same reason we hit snooze every morning on our alarm, because it's hard to wake up. It's hard to change. Nobody wants to go to the gym. Nobody wants to change their diet. Nobody wants to sit down and meditate. And generally, we don't actually accept the call to adventure until we're forced to do it, right? And there's a wonderful Roman quote that says, "Fate guides those who will, and those who won't, she drags." So we're being drugged right now. And the longer we resist that, the harder it's going to be. So that's the third master map. They're the Jungian archetypes, the tribe triangle, and then the hero's journey.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, Philip, I mean, most of your methodology isn't new. I mean, this is prevalent in many different disciplines, and they use different terminology and nomenclatures. And like you said, it is core and central to our storytelling of humanity. So how are you using the notion of culture development in the context of organizational change? And then as you start to get into it, which is not just organization, but individually and collective as a human species, how do we actually tackle something that's bigger than us, like climate change?
Yeah, that's a big one. Leadership is I've been in the leadership world for 30 years, and it's kind of just a very sterilized bucket or term that we've adopted to talk about how do I manage decision-making and change. I like the term culture development better because it actually is talking about human beings, which we all are. And at some point, if we want to start enacting a sustainable change, we need to look at our behavior. So the behavior of an individual is literally not only psychology, and the term psychology or psyche means soul in Greek. And we think psychology, the study of my mind, and it's really not. It's the study of my soul. And so when we start talking about psychology or leadership, a lot of times we stay up here, which is why it doesn't really work, because at some point we live down here in our limbic system. And so our individual habits are the things that not only define and create our identity and our personality and our destiny, but our collective habits are the things that create our collective destiny. And that's culture, the aggregate of the habits of a group of people is their culture. So if we want to enact a cultural change, something that's bigger than individuals, we need to at some point start altering the baseline behavior of our culture. And that's the reason why I've dug into not only psychology and mythology, because that's the stuff that's actually going to enact some long-term change. It's going to lead into our potentially survival, our legacy, our purpose, capital P purpose. And those are all really, really vital things for me, is to, how do I, at my age, I've got about 10,000 days left. So I want to make sure that what I'm doing is moving things forward in a way that, the world's different after I've left it.
So let me ask you, Philip. In terms of the collective action that makes up the collective action or the behavior of the human species, mm-hmm. It's one thing to, over time, more of us consume things like organic foods and eschew maybe meats, as an example, because of the carbon footprint. Mm-hmm. But there are other dynamics within that, which is going to be special interest groups, those that are benefiting from the likes of oil and gas and other industries that basically are the creator of the carbonation or carbon footprints. And they are offering to society cheaper alternatives, lower forms of transportation. So in other words, if you're a consumer and you have to choose between an electric vehicle versus a traditional car, which is going to have the lower cost and which one are you going to be swayed to pursue? And most people end up pursuing an SUV that's a combustion engine versus an electric or hydrogen alternative. Same thing with solar energy, for example. People choose to consume traditional electricity from the grid rather than relying on solar panels that get installed onto the rooftops. So there are actors there that's changing or trying to counter the cultural development of society. How do you actually work in that overall counterbalance?
Okay, it's important to realize that um, we are a tribal organism. We're designed to operate in groups of 100 people and less. So it's literally hardwired into us. That's our legacy at a very root cause. And like biologically, for example, we're designed to be able to survive in famine. And to do that, we will always have the propensity to want to eat as much fat and sugar as possible because you didn't get it very often, right? Living on the savannah of Africa. So when you had a chance to eat as much fat as you could, you gorged and you put on a little fat so you could survive for those couple weeks where you got nothing. So we're perfectly designed for the world. The problem is that now we have too much. And we have the same operating system that says, eat that fat when you can, but we have access to fat forever now, which means that now we're dying of obesity at an epidemic rate. And I use this example because we can't change our organism. We cannot evolve. We do not have time to evolve physically. We only can evolve culturally. So this is what's going to save us. We are a tribal organism. We will always think our small selves first. So if I have a chance to make a little extra money for my tribe, even though it may not be an altruistic thing for the planet, I'm going to be faced with that choice all the time. So yes, the SUV is cheaper for my family, and I'm going to think my family first. And I'm not proposing that this is a good thing. Neither is being fat. We at some point have to recognize that that demon is there, invite it to the table, and then say, that's going to keep showing up for us, but we need to elevate our thought process to something that's bigger than ourselves. And the way that, as a culture, we have gone from small tribal organisms that now are in alliance in a nation system, that involves strong mythology. It involves a strong shared vision for the future. It involves potentially a large threat that is bigger than all of us. And this is kind of the thing that will always weld people together. And the joke in anthropology is we will never become a global species until the aliens attack us.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
really, global warming, there you go. It's about as close as you can get.
Yeah, actually, what you just said, as well as earlier on at the onset of the interview, is that yes, it's about mythology. Yes, it's about storytelling. It's about inspiring. It's about getting down to the heart. But it's only when we're faced with imminent death, or basically looking at survival and our existential threat, then are we going to be compelled to actually change? And it's interesting because right now, as we speak about this, Area 51 is getting a lot of attention, a lot of UFO sightings, even by pilots and military pilots and so forth. So I wonder at what point how severe climate change has to be in their backyard in order for people to forego their individual 100-member tribe thought process to a bigger human survival thought process.
Yeah. It's a really good question. I don't have the answer for it, except to say that we can modify our behavior. We have the neuroplasticity to do it. And I don't want to be complete gloom and doom because, I'm of the age where, the meditation was something you had to go to India for. And the Beatles had to go travel to India and then bring a guru in to teach them how to meditate. And now, my teenage daughter meditates because everybody does. So we have changed as a species because of access to knowledge. People are eating better. And I live here in Southern California, and we look and behave differently than the rest of the country. And I don't know the last time you've traveled across the country, but when you get back to California, you go, oh, wow, people look different here. People don't smoke. There's very, very little or much less nicotine consumption here. We're having less war. statistically. So there's a lot of really amazing things happening with our culture that is species wide. And so, when you look at the adoption of recycling, for example, I can look in my backyard right now and I have a recycling container, and I have a biodegradable container that the city gives me. That didn't happen when I was young. So we are making some pretty drastic, changes that have been adopted at a nation system level. Will it be fast enough? Who knows? The jury's out on that, and you know more about the climate change conversation. But I have heard that they're now looking at how to prepare for the effects. So we want to mitigate how, on what continuum the damage is going to be, but they're moving into preparation right now, which that's a wonderful application of tribe and kinship and get to know your neighbors. I mean, these are all big things.
Well, as someone that lives in Southern California, I mean, you see firsthand the impacts of the recent rains, the mudslides, and of course the eventual sea level rise that's going to erode into the beachfront homes that are there. That's multi-million dollars, or potentially billions in real estate's in jeopardy. So I think at some point the story is going to come closer and more personal, and it's going to not only touch their minds and their hearts, but also their wallet. And I think eventually at some point they're going to have to take action. Well, it's been a pleasure having you. So today I've been joined by Philip Folsom. He's an anthropologist, culture development expert, veteran, and the CEO of Wolf Tribe. Philip, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Scott.